We're going to look at biopsychosocial development and health and the impact this has on trauma and influences this has on play development. When looking at biopsychosocial development, it is important that we look at the biopsychosocial model of health developed by Ingle in 1977. This is a holistic approach and impacts the causes and effects as well as the behaviours, but it is also known as a systematic theory that consists of 3 elements. We can see here the 3 elements of biology, psychology and social context. So first we'll be looking at biological and growth development, then we'll be looking at the psychological, so how people think, feel, behave and learn, and finally the social context, so the family background, societal patterns, relationships and culture. Early childhood experiences and abuse change the genes in the central nervous system and immune system regulation, changing the genetics, predisposition and epigenetics. Epigenetics refers to the expressed gene of the child. So it's not talking about the structure of the child's DNA, but it's the determination of the gene's predisposition to turning on the gene or turning the gene off according to the experiences, nutrition, toxins and drugs that are experienced. So evidence shows up to 12 times more epigenetic changes in children that have been abused than non-maltreated children. Paul MacLean developed the theory of the triune brain, which is divided up into 3 parts: the reptilian brain, mammalian brain, and the human brain. First is the reptilian brain, which is also known as the hindbrain. So the brainstem and cerebellum start to develop first, and as you can see, this is all of our survival factors, so it can also be known as a survival brain. Next is the mammalian brain, also known as the hindbrain, and this is when the limbic system controls our hormones and chemistry, emotions and memories. This is also known as the emotional brain. Next is the human brain, also known as the forebrain, and this is where we do all of our thinking, processing and learning. So I like to call it the thinking brain. The neocortex controls our behaviour, language and processes our emotions and memories and sensory information. The prefrontal cortex, this is our higher order thinking or executive processing. And as we look closer at the brain, we can see the cortex and limbic system, as well as the amygdala. The amygdala is activated when an individual senses threat through neuroception. Neuroception is the unconscious, constant scanning of internal and external sensations for threat to the individual. The brain is designed to process information for survival and cognitive information separately. However, the mind and body are designed to be integrated. The body senses threat and the cortex processes the threat, whilst the prefrontal cortex analyzes, plans and decides what to do with the threat. To explain this easier, this drawing has been adapted based on Dan Siegel and Tina Bison's theory of a house. The bottom floor has our survival rooms. The middle floor is where we feel our emotions, where we expel energy or soothe, and where we collect sensory memories, dirty laundry, and sort and process them. The top floor is where we learn, problem solve, plan, experiment, and process our body's information. Here we store processed linguistic memories. This area is under construction until 25. The blue door is the amygdala. When a threat is perceived, the blue door is closed. The amygdala activates the survival brain and stress chemicals preparing the body to fight, flight or freeze to survive. This increases heart rate, blood pressure, circulation and breathing, tenses muscles, and it deactivates what impedes survival, such as sleep, hunger and digestion, and temperature regulation. When the body is in survival mode and the blue door is closed, the thinking brain is disconnected. offline, or some may say it has flipped the lid. When quickly soothed and relaxed, the blue door is open and the thinking brain can reconnect, planning and making decisions. When the brain is not quickly soothed, it stays in survival mode. This creates toxic stress chemicals. We all have different levels of stress chemicals we can tolerate before the stress chemicals become too high. I think of it as the level of heating in the house. When the blue door is closed, the rooms heat up quickly. When the thermostat is set on high, the rooms will heat up faster and soon the heat is unbearable. If the thermostat is set lower, it takes longer to heat the house until it is unbearable. I liken the level on the thermostat to the window of tolerance. We all have a different level of stress we can tolerate. This is called the window of tolerance. This window is widened and narrowed from our social experiences. When we are within our normal range, we are able to function at our best. We ebb and flow from fatigue and sleepiness to optimal performance. Healthy stress, or eustress, is a healthy part of development when relieved quickly and short-lived. It can also sometimes be necessary for us to function at our optimal performance. When our stress levels exceed or dip lower than our window of tolerance due to ongoing abuse or the neglect of a caring adult, our survival mode is activated long-term. The automatic functions for survival, the ones we don't have to think about, sits in a system called the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. The ANS has two divisions, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The polyvagal nerve theory by Stephen Porges explains how the polyvagus nerve controls the ANS. This nerve connects to the body's organs and muscles to the brain. This connection is named the social engagement system and is reactive or receptive to body sensations in the social environment, such as facial expressions, touch, and voice intonation. When the body feels safe, it tells the brain to activate the parasympathetic system and engage with others. So when our body feels safe, we're relaxed and the face muscles respond to this by smiling. We can rest and digest. When the body senses a threat, the body communicates this to the brain and the amygdala activates the sympathetic nervous system ready to mobilize and fight or run. When stress is prolonged, we can become stuck on, not returning to baseline and experiencing the sympathetic nervous system symptoms all the time. When the body is in a circumstance where it cannot run or fight, the sympathetic system is kicked into overdrive and the parasympathetic system is activated. The passive defensive system immobilizes and freezes the body. We can also become stuck on off. This diagram shows more clearly how the vagus nerve is connected to the organs and muscles and how the parasympathetic system impacts these organs and the symptoms that these organs will show. Here we can see the symptoms of the parasympathetic system being stuck on off and the sympathetic system being stuck on. As we have seen, the brain develops neural connections from the brainstem up. These pathways connect to the different areas of the brain and the polyvagus nerve connects the brain and the body. So neural pathways are like a tree trunk, growing branches and twigs that are connected. Sometimes as a tree grows, it is pruned. As we age, neural pathways, or tree branches, grow stronger and thicker when an experience is repeated over and over. The experience is continually repeated. The pathways are myelinated. This is a substance that covers the neural pathways, or axons. I think of it as the rubber that protects electrical cords. I also liken myelination to a car driving down a scrub road. The road is rough and covered until it has been used continually and the cars have flattened the road, and eventually someone decides to make a bitumen highway. The highway connects to the other roads quicker. When the highway is not used, it will become grown over by scrub again and forgotten. If the experience is not repeated, then the neural pathways, the trees, twigs and branches not getting enough nutrients, are fragile and snap off or are pruned. As we have seen, the child's social environment plays a major role in their development. The social environment of an individual is depicted well in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First, we can review physiological and safety needs. Poverty, lack of education, parenting skills, parental mental health and illness, and substance abuse can all lead to the cause of not being able to provide for a child's needs. This could be through transient housing, dysfunctional families, financial stress, limited resources, and unemployment. Parental adversity and stress has an impact in the attachment of the child. A child needs to feel safe, secure, and supported by having a safe base to explore and make social connections from, and then return back to when needed. A parent's stress is contagious as a child picks up on the sensory information. An insecure attachment and stress can lead to a low self-esteem, poor education and achievement, and in turn this can lead to unemployment and the inability to reach self-actualization. When a child experiences trauma and abuse, they are stuck in survival mode and trying to fulfill their physiological and safety needs, unable to progress further through the hierarchy of needs. So there are 6 types of child abuse: verbal, shaming, helicopter parenting, sexual abuse, and physical abuse. The last type of abuse is neglect. This is when a child's emotional or physical need is not met. We're biologically programmed to respond to interactions. These interactions are termed a serve and return of communication. This can be verbal or non-verbal, and these interactions are essential to building the architecture of the brain. When the child's environment fails to provide this stimulation, the stress response is activated. This is seen in neglect. There are 4 subcategories of neglect. The 4 categories range from occasional inattention, which has no harm for the child and gives them experience to develop self-soothing skills, to severe neglect, where a child is given no attention and their physical and hygiene needs are unmet. Studies show that at least 80% of children in foster care have experienced some type of neglect. By age 3, a baby's brain has reached almost 90% of its adult size. Repetitive sensory stimulation increases the brain size and neural pathways. Here we can see the difference in size and development. We can also see how sensory deprivation shows a smaller brain volume. The darker areas in the brain is where the amygdala is situated. The red area shows an increased activity in the prefrontal cortex region. A lack of development in these areas increases the risk of mental and physical health problems. Neglect is divided into 2 categories: emotional neglect and physical neglect. Emotional neglect is a failure to support a child's emotional needs. This is done through isolating the child, terrorizing them, ignoring them, corrupting them, by verbal assaulting, and also by overpressuring the child to achieve way beyond their developmental capabilities. As we can see, there may be many causes of abuse. One of the causes of abuse may be psychological problems. Adults that were abused in childhood are 9 times more likely to participate in criminal activity and 30% more likely to abuse their own children later on. Hence, the intergenerational impact of abuse continues. This abuse and trauma has a detrimental lifelong impact to the child's development and health. So to explain further, the individual is mentally harmed from external stressful events with inadequate recovery. They feel powerless, helpless, and lack control, experiencing toxic stress. When trauma is experienced, the brain is in constant survival mode and is unable to perform critical connections. Trauma is divided into 2 categories. Type 1, which is a big T, is sudden shock, intense terror of a single event. This can be accidents or falls, medical or surgery trauma, violent acts, loss, or natural disasters. Trauma type 2, or little t, is chronic and accumulating and did not receive a repair. These events can be relational, where there is repeated abuse, neglect, or bullying, and or developmental, where a child feels vulnerable, has a loss of safety, and a loss of self control repeatedly throughout childhood. This can also be known as the adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs impact the safety and stability of the child's social environment. They change neurological wiring and increase physical illness. In the study conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and the Kaiser Permanente Health Care Organization in California in 1995, ACEs referred to the three specific kinds of childhood adversity faced in the home environment. In the study, 2/3 of respondents had at least one ACE. The response was graded as to the more ACEs an individual had, the higher the risks of adult health risk behaviours and diseases. 12.5% of respondents had 4 or more ACEs. 4 or more ACEs increases the risk of health risk behaviours. This can be 4 to 12 times increase in alcoholism and drug abuse, a 2 to 4 times increase in smoking, and around 2 times more likely to be physically inactive and develop severe obesity. So this will give you an idea of the impact that social stress can have on the health of the body-mind system. So the following illnesses are due to the body's chemistry. As you can see, this list is very extensive and again reiterates how important positive early childhood experiences are critical and how toxic stress has detrimental long-term impacts on the child's life. As we have seen, a child's family system and their bioecological social system impacts their social environment. All family systems are different, and the boundaries around these allow the child to control the environment and to develop interdependence. A parent's window of tolerance, their parenting skills and education, their attachment style, the sensitivity and attunement they have to their child, their ability to stay present when their child is dysregulated, and their own emotional and psychological state impacts their parenting. Here we have a list of adversities that the parent may be experiencing, causing high levels of stress and as a result, impacting the child. Poverty has a huge impact on Australian children. 17% of Australian children are living in poverty. That's 28,000 Australian children aged 17 and under. Poverty can impact children's housing. Some children will move around 3 to 6 times in 12 months. Some children are unable to receive appropriate health care and are unable to participate fully in school activities. Many children do not receive nutritious meals every day, and many do not even eat 3 meals a day. The child's safety, health and well-being are impacted, as well as their social connections, the school participation and performance, and eventually education, employment, socioeconomic status, and their involvement within the community. This list gives us an idea how a parent's adversity impacts a child's health and well-being, particularly their psychosocial development and sense of trust or mistrust in the world. When an infant is born, they are helpless and rely on others to get their needs met. The brainstem sets to work automatically, regulating blood pressure, heart rate and circulation. Next, the cerebellum begins to develop the senses. The relationship between the infant and the caregiver builds the neural pathways and structure of the brain to develop a sense of trust or mistrust in the world. The infant cries to communicate they have a need to be met. This releases stress chemicals into the brain. When soothed, the neural receptors are learning to calm and the stress chemicals in the brain are lowered. When the infant's needs are met, an infant can feel safe and secure to explore the world. Around 18 months to 3 years, the limbic system begins to develop. The child reacts to extreme emotions that they have not experienced before. They now have the language to express these emotions, but there is a lack of self-control and experience in how to deal with these emotions. At 3 to 5 years, the child's limbic and cortex are continuing to develop and integrate. The child is quickly learning new information, language, and social skills, and they want to express themselves by carrying out their own thoughts and ideas. They start to play with others, making friends and planning their own activities. When the child enters primary school, their cortex is continually growing and pruning, as they learn new activities, knowledge, and skills, and as they develop more complex and higher thinking. At 13 to 18 years old, the child is now exploring their identity. They want to know who they are and where they are going. This is done through social relationships, exploring their own beliefs, ideas, and goals, and understanding themselves and their personal identity. As we have seen in the previous table, it is important that infants have somatic play and attachment play so they can understand their bodies and make connections with others. In order to do this, they need to be able to have constant touch, serve and return interactions, and be able to feel safe to leave the home base to explore. When a child develops mistrust, they are hypervigilant, misinterpreting situations as dangerous and feeling unsafe to explore and unable to engage in experiences. At 18 months to 3 years, infants are now mobile. They are able to explore the world and stimulate their senses through embodiment play and sensory play. Children are beginning to develop multiple attachments, and if they can regulate their emotions, then they can have social connections and affiliation with other children their own age. When children develop mistrust, they can feel unsafe to explore and have fewer learning opportunities. They also may be reactive, aggressive, or withdrawn and have fewer social interactions with others. Children are wanting to understand their world, and they are now projecting their ideas, social skills, and language onto small figurines through small world play. Children that are unable to develop autonomy and emotional regulation are less likely to affiliate with others, and due to their small window of tolerance and hypervigilant neuroceptors, they may misinterpret social situations as dangerous, becoming reactive. Children at 3 to 18 years like to pretend play and role play social experiences within society. This gives them the opportunity to practice, familiarize, and solve problems in that context without the consequences. When a child experiences feelings of shame, doubt, and guilt, they can have a low self-esteem and self-concept, creating feelings of inferiority and anxiety around taking risks, trying new skills, and following their interests. This can lead to a fear of failure, perfectionism, and less motivation to try new experiences. This leads to fewer opportunities, learning, and social interactions. So we have looked at adverse childhood experiences and the impact that this has on the child's development, their adoption of health risk behaviours, and finally, the diseases and disabilities that can lower mortality rate by up to 20 years. This flowchart clearly shows the transgenerational cycle of trauma from the child's early development into adulthood. If they develop an insecure attachment and have untreated trauma, this cycle continues. In conclusion, the child's brain is shaped by their social experiences and environment. A stressful environment with prolonged stress and trauma and abuse can lead to detrimental health, lifestyle, and development deficits. Deficits impact play and development, learning, and education. This continues the transgenerational cycle through epigenetics, the child's physical, social, and mental environment, health and illness, the role modelling of the parents, and the high risk of addictions.